Hello again and welcome back to Elisabeth Hogarth Designs. This is part 2 of our journey looking at the fabulous 3D embossing folders from Lisa Horton Crafts. Before we begin playing with different techniques, let's just take a step back and look at how we actually emboss the folders. So I'm going to begin with the knitted version. So they are all 6x6 3D embossing folders, which means that they are thicker than your average embossing folder, which means that for my particular machine, which is a Sizzix Big Shot Plus, I use the A plate. So I've got my grey base plate, I've got the A plate, and then I use one clear cutting plate. We do have information about this on the Lisa Horton Crafts Facebook page. I can leave you a link for that, but all we're going to do is to take the embossing folder. I want the knitted part to be embossed. Got ordinary white cardstock. It's quite good quality, but you don't have to go overboard. You'll find that these folders improve any paper that you use, but it's your personal preference. And then we're going to roll this through, and in this particular case I'm going to roll it through and back again. But on some of the papers I only roll it through once, and sometimes I roll it through 3 times. But let's just look at the quality of these fantastic folders. Look at that. It's like a real piece of knitting. It's absolutely incredible. So now you know how to actually do a basic emboss with a piece of paper. We're going to go through 9 different things for you to try. As I mentioned before, this is my second video all about the different techniques that you can use for the embossing folders. But today we're going to work with knitted, variegated leaf, roses, birthday greetings, in the garden, botanical fern, alstroemeria, dahlia, and delicate petals. These are my technique cards. So what I do is when I'm having a play, when I don't necessarily want to make a card, I play with different materials and different products. So then I write myself a little shorthand. So this is EF is for the embossing folder. Then I explain what paper I use or the ink, and then I give myself a little note just so that I can remind myself how to get the best out of it. So you'll see that I'm building up this portfolio of ideas, and I've got virtually a different idea for all of Lisa's embossing folders. So some of these are in the first video, and 9 of them for the new ones I'm going to quickly show you today. We're going to begin with the knitted folder, and because I wanted to try and show some texture because of the pattern, I decided that I would work with some ordinary cardboard and some brown paper. The cardboard is from the back of a paper pad, and it's round about 300 GSM. If you are using anything thicker, you're going to have to change the shim in your machine. I found out that I needed to take out the lower shim, and for the brown paper I discovered that you need to use a little bit more of a shim, so I used an extra sheet of paper. So all I'm going to do is to take my embossing folder and then run it through, and I'll show you the results. Here we have the cardboard, and you can see how brilliantly that has worked, and you've even got a fantastic pattern on the deboss side. Now of course you could ink over this or brush over it with some colour, and here is the brown paper, and again all you have to do is to take a square of paper, emboss it, and you've got yourself a fantastic background. Here's the brown paper, and I've added a mannish kind of feel to the card, and I'm quite pleased with the effect of it. The next material that I thought I would try with the Beautiful in the Garden embossing folder was vellum. So it can either be vellum or parchment. I've got two thicknesses here. I prefer the clear one because it's slightly weightier. The green one is a lovely colour, but it's a little bit flimsy, so you are going to have to be careful when using this, but it certainly does work. I would recommend only running it through the machine once though, because the paper does have a tendency to become more fragile. Because I'm hoping that you can see that we've got a really beautifully embossed piece of vellum, and because of the pressure on the vellum you've got a slightly white sheen to it. Let me see if I can show you better on a piece of card. I'm hoping that you could see that that is raised, and you can see the beautiful butterflies and the flowers and the leaves on there. I'll go through again with the clear one, but as I say, this one is slightly weightier, but again I'm only going to go through it once. Here's the clear version, and again it's like it's been beautifully etched. Can you see? So we're going to add some ink to this. Before I begin inking, I must quickly mention to you the new Lisa Horton Crafts Mixed Media mat. Apart from the 3D embossing folders, it's my absolutely favourite new tool. I don't actually know how I worked without it. It enables you to put a piece of paper or card onto your mat and work with it, and then you can simply wipe away the areas. You can use it as a blending mat. I'm pretty much using it on my desk all the time now, just for inking, for when I'm just working with the glues. Everything so far has wiped off. So all I'm doing here is gently using a finger dauber, patting some colour on. Now you will find that if you go in too hard, you might end up with a little bit of cracking. In fact, let me bring you in. I hope that you can see that a little bit more clearly. So, in the interest of craft, let me just show you. There's a little bit of cracking there, but I don't actually mind that, because what you could actually do is cut out the whole thing. But really, to keep everything intact, you're just going to dab the ink on top of the vellum. So these are my oxides. That was Twisted Citron. We've then got squeezed lemonade. Any ink will work. It's just what you like to work with. I've got another couple of inks that I'm going to use throughout these videos, but the choice is yours. But this gives you an idea of how the colours come together. So let's just add a little bit of the Kitsch Flamingo, which is a new oxide in my collection, and I have to say I do rather love it. So you can dab some of the colour off, and then you can bring it in and then just blend over the top. You can very gently smooth it, but I would say for the smaller items that I would pounce, and then you'll find that it will just hit the surface like so. Now on the clear one, we're going to work from the back, so we're going to show this white edging, which I think is a really cool technique, and then we're going to put the colour on the back. So this vellum is a slightly heavier weight, but you still need to be quite gentle with it, so it's a mixture of pouncing, smoothing it in, and then if you feel that the paper's not going to take it, leave well alone. And then you can just cut into this vellum, or you can use it as a front piece to your card. Let's go back in with the yellow. And we'll mix some of that yellow in with the pink, and you'll get a nice coral kind of blend. And then if I turn this over, we've got the most amazing, delicate colouring in, and it's lifted up by the white, and it's almost like an etching on a piece of paper. I ended up taking the vellum and turning it around and colouring it a little bit more with my inks and some watercolour brushes. Then I flipped it back and I created a frame around it. To highlight the colour, I added another panel of white, and again I finished it with complementary colours and stamps. It's quite a unique effect, and I think I will try this one again. The greener one that had the thinner paper was harder to colour, so I would definitely recommend the thicker vellums. While I'm looking at this embossing folder, this is another card that I made for the launch of the Edger dies, and this one is the cherry blossoms, but you can see in the background here that I use that technique of adding white ink to the embossing folder and then layering it up and getting the colour that I wanted. So two really pretty cards from a really pretty embossing folder. When I'm working on my craft table, I spritz the mat with a piece of water. For the purposes of filming, I'm just using one wet wipe and then drying off with a soft cloth. And every time, without fail, doesn't matter what I put on it, this comes up beautifully clean. Moving on to technique number 3, and this time we're going to highlight the wording on the birthday greetings embossing folder, and you can do this in 2 ways. I have found that darker coloured card is easier, you'll get a better effect, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the back of the letters. So by that I mean that the letters themselves are debossed, so you can feel like a channel in the letter, and then the background is raised, it's higher up. So the alternative, on the embossed side, the letters are embossed and the background is flat. So the side that you want is the side where the letters are flat and the background is raised up. Now I found that there's a mixture of swiping some white ink. It can be any type of ink that you prefer. It's whatever you have in your creative arsenal. I have got some Brilliance archival pigment ink. It's called Moonlight White. I have found that it works for me, and if I had a smoother roller, I would roll from the ink pad onto the embossing folder, because you'll find that it takes away the swiping pattern of it. But all that I've done there is just roll over to try and smooth out the ink. It's then a matter of adding your paper. I always use scraps. You can of course just take an ordinary piece of 5x5 or 6x6 card and then place it in the middle of the folder. But for technique purposes, when I'm trying to work out what I want to do, I just use all my extra bits of scraps, so it's a really good stash buster. Let's run this through the machine. Here we go. So you open this up and you've got this amazing chalky effect on the back of the letters. I really like that as a technique. You can of course keep adding more white ink, and if you really want to highlight the letters, you can take your ink pad again just as it is and very gently swipe it across the top, and you'll see that the letters are highlighted. So that's technique number 3. Use your white ink to highlight the background or to bring out the happy birthday letters. This is card number 3, and so you can see the happy has been cut out and layered up. I literally slotted the embossed letters onto the main background here. If you want to know how to make this background, then take a look at my video for the inky backgrounds. I'll leave you the link either on the right hand corner of the screen or in the comments below. But I love the effect of this card. I don't make purple cards very often, but I'm really happy with this one. Also, one of my favourite, and probably my favourite product of last year from Lisa Horton were these double layered sentiments, so keep an eye out for those. But really super fun, super bright card. Technique number 4 is more to show you how different tools and different inks make different effects, and it's entirely up to you the effect that you like and how you want your card to look. For this one we are using the absolutely stunning Alstroemeria, which was a favourite of my granddad's because he used to grow them in the garden. So all I've done here is take the ordinary white cardstock and I've run it through the machine, and there we have the fantastic Alstroemerias. Now I would use it as a white on white card just as it is, but let me show you what happens when you use Distress Oxide and one of the Lisa Horton brushes. So these are the brushes that I now use. I absolutely love the larger ones with the smooth heads. These ping back into shape, and you've also got the ability to move the head, and I never thought it would make a difference, but it really does. So these are another must have as far as I'm concerned. Because I'm working with a smaller piece of card, I actually am going to use with one of the smaller brushes, but my preferred ones, wherever possible to blend, are the larger. So again, I'm going to bring you in. So remember, all I'm using is this brush, and then we're going to go in with the Kitsch Flamingo first. put some ink onto our mat, take a little bit off, and then I'm going to go into the centre of the flower and literally just lightly blend it over the top. The further away that you come from the head, the softer the effect. I hope you can see that there, that this is still bringing in colour, but it's much softer. So we're going to go in with a little bit more ink. I'm going to put my finger on the top and just bend and ease the colour where the embossing is raised. And all you're doing is stroking the paper and allowing the colour to tickle the embossing. So this one more time. Let's go in with this part here. I'm just putting the pink into the centre of the flower, and then I want to just quickly take that little bit of colour off my brush. So that was my wet wipe, the one wet wipe that I'm going to use for the whole process, and then I dry it off on my cloth. And then we're moving on to the squeezed lemonade, and again a fair bit of ink, and then we'll take some off, and then we're going to tickle where the stamens are, and you'll see that it just kisses the paper, and where it's raised it's adding a really subtle colour, and the pink is blending with the yellow. Let's just go on that stamen again, and it's almost like your alstroemeria in the garden, or a nice picked bunch. So I hope that you can see that. I would work on this a little bit longer, but I'm hoping that it gives you the idea. So we're going to leave that one there, and we're going to use the same ink. So they're the Distress Oxides, but rather than the brush we're going to use the daubers that I showed you earlier. So here's my embossed piece of card, some ink on the dauber. Let's take a little bit off, and then this time I pounce. So you can either pounce and add the colour. I've got quite large hands, quite long fingers, so I'm quite heavy-handed, I think. So you can, if you're careful, smooth the colour onto and across the embossing. But I tend to find that if I press the ink first, so I'm pouncing, I'm gently lifting the dauber up and down to lay down some of the colour, and then I'm smoothing it across. Right, there we go. The preference is always yours. I have found that when I'm using the daubers, I get a stronger colour. So if you want that added depth, then try the daubers. But most of the time for the flowers, I would go with Lisa's brushes. I like the subtlety of them, and I like that you can go in again with the two colours and keep adapting what you're doing. Again, given more time, I would work to these outer edges. but I've got 5 more techniques I want to show you, and there's only a certain amount of filming time that we can have together. So then we're just going to bring in some green. I find it harder to go along the stems, so less is more in this case. If you're not feeling confident of it, then don't go in too hard. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's only a piece of paper and you can go again. So the top one are the brushes and the bottom one are the daubers. And as I say, it's entirely up to you which one you prefer. Before I leave this embossing folder, I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to change the inks. The other inks that I would like to show you are the Spectrum Noir Harmonies. These ones are quick dry dye inks, and I have found that these have got a heavier setting to them. They're quite opaque. You can get water based ones which are fantastic. However, these are the ones that I have available, and I just want to quickly show you that it's not so much about the inks, although they help. It's to do with the way that you add the colour. So I'll speed up the film and I'll begin by using the brushes, and then I'll move on to the daubers. Here are the Spectrum Noir. So this is with the brush and this is with the dauber. I think you can tell that these inks are stronger and they do take a little time to blend in. These are the oxides and these are the Spectrum Noir. So as I say, it's not really a technique so much, it's more to show you that you can get similar effects, just different ways of doing it, and slightly deeper shades of colour. I ended up using the brushed Alstroemeria rather than the daubers, so I'll save these ones for another time, but I kept the panels as they were, and then I incorporated a couple of die cut sentiments into the middle, so you don't always have to keep the whole square of the paper. And again, the trick to it is colour coordinating your background layers. To finish off the flowers, I use some Tonic Nouveau drops. Within this range of embossing folders, you've actually got embossing folders that include a separate die cut. So this is the variegated leaf, and you can see that where the highlight is around these leaves, this is your cutting die and it matches perfectly. So this time we're going to use some coloured cardstock and some gilding wax, and you'll see that it's really simple to get an effect like this. The first thing I'm going to do is to die cut a few of these leaves, and they come as one set, and then this section here I will simply emboss. I have to say that since I've had these embossing folders, I have used far more of my older products. Some of the things I've had for a few years and have completely run out. These gilding waxes are a case in point, so I will need to go on the website and pick up a few more, but they work, and it's far more interesting to do something like this than to just have them sitting in a drawer. And you can see how fantastically well this has embossed. It's just outstanding. And then we have our leaves that look so lifelike. It's just unbelievable, the detail that you can see. So to lift up the colour of the leaf, to make it look like a an autumnal leaf. This is just a bronze colour, and as I say, when I took these pots out, I had a route around my craft room and I thought, oh, this isn't going to work, but it's very, very old. It's at least 6, well, probably even more than that. It's at least 8 years old. It's one of those things that I bought at a craft fair, I used for a little bit, and then it ended up in a drawer. So my suggestion to you would be is to pull out all of those things that you don't use anymore and just give it a go. So all I'm doing, let me pull you in again so that you can really see the detail on this. All I'm doing is adding gilding wax to my finger and smoothing it over the top. I think you would get an even better result with the newer waxes, especially the Stamperia ones. There's quite a few on the market now. Lisa Horton stocks them as well, so it's worth looking on her website. And all I'm doing is just working my way around the ridges of the leaves, and you get this really cool effect. Technique number 5 includes another fantastic die within the roses embossing folder, so you can see that it really is quite a striking effect, and I'm going to show you how to get this tea rose type of effect. So let me just quickly give you one tip. When you have die cut your rose, take the embossing folder and you want to find the deboss side. You want to find it where the rose is reseeding. Turn your die cut over, so when you die cut, it will go through like this, and that's your cutting blade. So you want to take the rose, turn it over, and then you're going to fit it in like a jigsaw, and you'll find that it sits in like its own little nest. There you go. It locks into place, and then you want to bring the folder over, turn it over, and then you're going to go ahead and emboss it. Here is our embossed rose, and as you can see, it looks like a real rose. It's unbelievable. You can of course take your brushes and your inks and lightly brush over, and you'll get a really subtle effect. This one's a little bit bolder, and it would be quite good for mixed media projects. So let's get our inks and our mica powder. Once again, we're going to try the Harmony ink pads. These are the quick dry dyes, but unusually we're going to ink in grey first. So this is quite a new ink pad, so it's quite damp, so I'll pull you in so that you can see what I'm trying to achieve. So for this one here, we're almost going to blend the colour on, and you're going to think, goodness me, what are you doing, Elisabeth? But bear with me, and I hope that you will like the effect. As I say, these embossing folder, these products make you want to craft. They make you want to try different techniques just to see what happens. And if you don't like it, it's really not a problem. But at least you've tried, and then every now and again you'll come across something new and you'll want to use it in your project. So now we're going to go in with this really vibrant Chinese red, and this is quite an opaque ink. You can see the intensity of the colour there. And this time what I've tried to do is to create a shadow. Now if you wanted to do a a funky piece of mixed media, this effect on its own would work. But this time I'm literally pouncing this red on, so I'm not smoothing it over because I don't want the grey to move. I'm bringing in some colour, and to me it looks like a Victorian tea rose or something, because something quite old-fashioned, one of those big blousy roses. And because I've already got the grey underneath, where the petals meet and curl, you've got your own shadow. And I think that that gives the flower added dimension. The white has stayed true because the ink's not hitting it, but you've got shadows and you've got colour. This isn't going to appeal to everyone, I know that, but I wanted you to see that it doesn't always have to be light, delicate colours. Now, to give it a little bit of, let's just move this up again. To give it a little bit of shimmer, I'm just going to take one of Lisa's mica powders, and this is raspberry. I've got too much there, but we'll have to go with it. And I'm going to gently add that to the centre, and you'll see by the time that I've finished, I've got a really faint shimmer on the ends of the petals. It's beginning to work in now. You will need to set the mica powder. Even though this ink is quite wet, it's better to set the flower there we go. And then if I bring that up, I'm hoping that you can see the glimmer on there. You may have spotted that I didn't post the card for the leaves, and that's because I incorporated the leaves with my roses. You can also see that I've used the knitted panel again, but can you see the glisten on the rose there now and the shine of the gilding wax? This is another card that I made in a similar type of way, so I used the yellow roses this time, and again I've taken the other embossing folders and just mix and match them together. So don't ever feel that you have to stick to one type of embossing folder. So 2 different styles of roses, both beautiful cards. Another technique that I tried using the wonderful delicate petals, which also has a coordinating die that cuts out these petals separately, is using gelatos. So this is something else that I've had. I bought at a craft fair and I thought, oh, I was going to make all these amazing things, and I never really have. So as I say, dig out all of those products that you haven't used for a few years. Now there are 2 ways of doing this. You can add colour to the embossing folder. You can add colour. These are creamy wax water soluble sticks of colour. They're fabulous to play with, but you do need to practice a little bit to get the effects that you want. And I found that if I coloured the petals first, I preferred the look. And this is where my crib cards come into play. These are all the different techniques that I tried. I tried the background, I tried it dry, I tried it with water, I tried the emboss section again with water, then the deboss, and then I moved on to the petals with the ink and the water. So the technique that I'm going to show you means die cutting the flowers, colouring them, then embossing them. So all I'm doing is randomly adding some colour. So I've got some shades of blue here. They're like wax pastels, and they are water soluble, which means that we can blend them a little. I'm going to try this one with some water on it first, and then we'll see which effect that we like. So there's our blues, and then we have the green. I'll just put this bit down as if it's a little bit of a stem, even though the whole thing is a petal. You can turn them into a flower. There we go. And then we'll add a little bit of green in there as well. So again, you can go in with your finger. So you can see they look quite mucky at this stage. But you can go in with your finger and just smooth the colours together. It's quite waxy and everything blends really easily, and it just highlights the stunning pattern on the petal. You can also add a little bit of ink to the edges, so the ink will just smooth out the edges. So you can either have it just with finger blending, or you can take your water brush and you can blend in the colours like so. I won't add too much water because I do like, but you can see that the colours are mixing beautifully together. So that's another style that you can try. Or you can take a little bit of the colour again. They're a little bit like pan pastels, they blend wonderfully. And then you can come in, let me bring you up so that you can see what I'm doing with the palette. You can come in, add some water to the gelatos in your blender. This is where this mat is just so brilliant. It's really made me want to craft more, just to play, not necessarily to produce a card, but to certainly try different techniques and just see the finished results. I suspect once that is dry, I could then go in again with some more ink. But there you go, there's 3 more different ways just within using the gelatos. This card is more subtle than some of the others that I've made. It's really about the textures and the colours and the layers all melding together. You can see that I have embossed the background again of the delicate petals and used this as one of my layers. I only ended up using a couple of those gelato coloured petals, and I laid them within the impression on the back. A few butterflies and a lovely sentiment, and that gives you a really fresh, pretty little card. I kept with the same colour theme, and this is another card that I made for the show, and again you can see the petals, and then this time I've incorporated it with the ferns, which is another set that's coming up shortly. But you can see how I'm using the same colours, the same papers, to give me very different effects. We have one more embossing folder that includes the die cut, but this time we're going to focus on the embossing folder itself. This one is absolutely stunning. if I had to choose a favourite, this would be in my top 3. I don't think I could choose a favourite, but this is definitely in my top 3 of this particular set. So this is the Dahlia, and what we're going to do with this one is we're going to bring in our ink spritzers. I have a couple of ink sprays that I bought when I was making the mulberry blooms, and I thought it would be quite fun to try them with this particular embossing folder. I was amazed by the results, and you really don't need a lot of ink. Now, if I wasn't filming, if I was doing this in my craft room, I've got a big old box that I spray into, but I have to say that once again this brilliant mixed media mat came to my rescue. But I wouldn't ordinarily work on it in this way, because really you need to come higher. But for the purpose of this, this is an ice ink dye, and I'm literally going to add a few squirts directly onto the embossing folder, and then I'm going to take my pieces of card and lay them directly on the top. So that was the deboss side. So the background, you can see it's already smooshing together, so it's quite exciting. So when you put this one through the die cutting machine, I would suggest adding an extra piece of copier paper. I'm back with the embossing folder, so you can see it's a little bit leaky, but oh my, the result that you get is so worth it. I just think that is absolutely fabulous, and when that dries, that is going to make the most beautiful card. We're going to do a similar thing, but this time we're going to add the spray directly to the paper. And as I say, I would normally be spraying from a greater distance and into a there we go, into a cardboard box. But again, we're going to lift these up, pop them into our folder, and we're going to emboss them as they are, as they're wet, onto our piece of copier paper, and then I'll show you the effect. Absolutely glorious. I think if anything, you get a deeper emboss this way round because the paper is slightly damp, and that always seems to help the embossing process, but it just moves the ink around, and it's like you've got a luxurious piece of embossed card. It would be brilliant if you were making wedding cards or wedding invitations. I love that technique. You may be surprised by the end result of this card, because I have taken these pastel colours of the background panels, and I ended up using 3 of them because I love them so much, and I made them pop by using really quite strong background colours. Those colours were then incorporated into the sentiment, but you can see the shine from those spray inks. I've made my own background, and you're not going to see a card like that in the shops, are you? Absolutely love this Dahlia folder. And another way to use it, remember we had the die cuts that you can colour. This particular card, I inked up the flowers and then I embossed them, after which I added some mica powder. So again, totally different looks, and that's what I really love about these embossing folders, how different you can make every single card look just by your use of colour and the mediums that you're using. Our final technique today again uses items from my craft cupboard that I haven't used in a while, and this particular folder works a treat with this technique. The reason being is that because of the veining in it, you've got a reservoir, and I'll show you what I mean as we start the technique. So this is the botanical fern, and again this would have to be in my top 3. Now before you begin colouring the folder, you want to have slightly damp paper. So this is just a water spray, and all I'm doing is add a light mist. And you don't want that to be totally dry, but it does help if it's slightly damp. The items from my craft stash are these sparkle pens, which people use for colouring. They use for topping up the colour when they're doing their flowers and their backgrounds. I haven't used these as much as I ought to have done, but this technique is perfect for these particular items. So here's our reservoir, and what I mean by that, there's like a ridge where you can run your finger through the embossing folder, and all we're going to do is we're going to take the sparkle pens so the ferns are debossed, and all you're going to do, I'm going to bring in so that you can see this, you're going to squeeze the pen, and you're going to allow the ink to run through that reservoir. And then if you brush gently over, you will find that the ink pulls into the leaves. And you want it to be quite random. You'll feel where the design is coming through. I appreciate that it's not the easiest thing to see on the white, but hopefully the more ink that I add, so I'm almost flooding the inlets of the fern. And let's try a little bit of a pink. So we'll just get it going. There we go. And you'll see that it's sparkling away. There we go. And it's just finding its way into the pattern of the fern. On my original one that I tried, I put in quite a deep pink, and for me it was a little bit too vibrant. But once you've started, you'll find various ways of doing it. So there we go. That one's really gone for it. I've probably added a bit too much there, but again, it's not the end of the world. Every time you're going to get a different effect. And just to smoosh a little bit more colour into there. And if you brush gently over, you can see how the colour is coming into play. I think that's enough colour for now. So then we're going to take our damp pieces of card. I'm just going to give it another little spritz just to make sure that it really is damp enough. And then I'm going to lay this over the top. so. And then I'm not expecting anything from that one, but I'm going to just cover the area. Pull the embossing folder over, and again I'm going to emboss with that piece of copier paper underneath. This is the moment of truth. I probably added a bit too much of the yellow, which is why everything's gone soggy. However, let's have a look. Whoa! Can you see that glistening? It's incredible. Excuse me. Can you see the glisten on there? It's just going to make the most incredible background. Oh my goodness, I love that. I hope you do too. I probably did add a little bit too much of the yellow, but you can still go back in while it's still damp and just define some of the leaves again. But I think that this will make an incredible background. So again, you can just do this on the 6x6 piece of card, and you wouldn't need to do anything else other than to add your sentiment. But I just think once that's dried, that's just going to look incredible. You can see on this one here that I did with the pinks that this is the one where I added a little bit of pen on the top, and that dark pink was too much. But as I say, get out those tools that you haven't used in a while and just have a play. I think it's just an incredible set of tools, and there you are. You've got a whole stack here of ideas of ways to use the embossing folders. Last but not least, these are the ferns, and I cut down each of the panels and framed them because I was thinking of museums and relics and things like that. Ferns are prehistoric plants, and I don't know, that just gave me a good excuse to use these framed slimlines as well. But I really like the end result of this card. I think it would make a good mail card, but equally anyone of any age would appreciate a handmade card like this one. Absolutely love the botanical ferns. Here are all of the 9 embossing folders. Did you enjoy seeing all the different techniques that we tried? Please let me know if I have inspired you to try some of these techniques. I'll remind you again that this is part 2. You can find part 1 on my channel, and I'll also leave you the link up here again. As I say, enjoy the process of crafting with them. Think outside the box. Just give the techniques a go, and who knows what you'll end up with. Please do come back and visit me again soon. Bye bye for now. Happy crafting. Please do tag me in the cards that you make and share. I would love to know that I have inspired you in some small way.